an active engagement in doing a three-part cross-analysis, obviously, of Minneapolis, Portland, and Vancouver, British Columbia. And it was an excellent demonstration of seeing what it means to create a sustainable and livable environment, and with focus in a densely populated urban area.
Music class really talked about are these green cities something that's only for more wealthy populations, or at least middle class to upper class populations, and actually not very amenable to lower income people, and what can be done to put the equality into sustainability.
So the opposite is the case, that if you provide people with new experiences that get them to do things differently, then they'll start to think about why they're doing them differently, or think about the consequences of doing things differently. So education comes from an experience, it doesn't produce an experience.
We flew into Portland, and that was right when we started the whole transportation aspect of the trip, because the trip was all walking or biking or mass transit. So our first experience with Portland mass transit was right from the airport with our luggage, and we took the streetcar, the light rail, into the Portland city center, and then walked about 10-minute walk with the luggage to Portland State University. And that's also when the students, I remember, got the first taste of Portlanders and what they're like, because they are really civically engaged, really socially engaged. So on the train and waiting at the stop, they're chatting us up, where are you going, what are you doing? And I remember a couple students, wow, they're really chatty here. Because that's part of Portland hospitality.
And later that day, we sent the students onto the streetcar system and assigned them in groups of 3 to different stops, and do a 5-minute walk around each stop to catalog all of the things that are around each stop. And the purpose of this was to immediately get our students comfortable with using local mass transit, and to get them more familiar with what amenities are available to them, so they could become more self-sufficient. That was one of our goals, is for our students to know the cities as quickly as possible, so they could be as self-sufficient as possible. And that relates to a larger goal of the course, which we call urban literacy. The idea that we want our students to know how to read a city quickly, know how to navigate a city, just be able to see more when they look at a city than they normally would see. We left it up to the students before, actually when we were planning the course, before we went anywhere. Students decided if they wanted their experience to be primarily bicycling oriented, or if it would be primarily walking and bus/rail oriented. And so we made those arrangements in advance. Students would rent bicycles if they were in the bicycle group, and they would get transit passes.
Yeah, transit passes, and the walking component was usually walking and transit, not just walking, because of the distances that we'd have to go.
I think being high density, the urban planning, and mixed use areas, there's zones that allow for active transportation like that. And the most effective way to engage with alternative transportation in those cities is actually just to physically mix it, and just good urban planning, and then just general infrastructural design.
Part of the strategy, actually, both in Portland and in Vancouver, is to have this boundary beyond which development is not happening. So the development strategy is what's known as infill. And what this produces is building up. And Vancouver is far more dense than most cities in North America. But the importance of density is that people can access all of the things that they need in a relatively short distance, which negates the necessity of having to travel great distances for one's needs, to have to use a car, and so forth. It's possible with a densely planned city for people to go an entire year without a car, being able to access things on foot or by train or bus.
Another aspect to density also that helps in terms of energy efficiency. When you have residences, most of the high-rise buildings, the skyscraper buildings of Vancouver, aren't office towers, they are residences. 51% of Vancouver's population at this moment in time is Asian, mostly immigrants coming from Hong Kong after China, mainland China, took over Hong Kong, and many of them emigrated to Vancouver. And already used to high-rise living, they were very open to moving into condos in high-rise. And high-rise buildings are very energy efficient, actually, because people are sharing energy, whether it's heating or cooling, by virtue of sharing walls and floors and ceilings. So there's actually less of a carbon footprint associated with the high-rise than there is with, my bungalow in St. Paul, which is a detached house, with a yard and such.
It's another cross-analysis. Myself and 3 others are going to be cycling on May 10th or between the 10th and the 20th. It's debatable right now for various reasons. The goal of it is technically cycling the touring Reconnaissance, and that's actually dubbed by Lars Christensen. And so what we're going to be doing is cycling in a completely self-sustained trip on touring bicycles and camping, basically taking roughly 30 to 35 days to bicycle to Portland, Oregon, where we will be meeting with a series of community representatives, legislators, state representatives, and looking and cross-analyzing their current legislative standings on the current cycling policy and as well as alternative transportation in general. And then bringing that report back, disseminating it to the proper organizations and representatives here in Minnesota, and actually pushing for physical legislative policy infrastructural change. So.